Billionaire came home early unannounced and found his maid at the garbage pile with a baby. What he saw shocked. Marcus Wellington had everything money could buy. At 42, he'd built a tech empire that stretched across 3 continents, lived in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering skyline of Manhattan, and wore watches that cost more than most people's homes. Yet as his private car pulled up to his estate 3 days earlier than scheduled, he felt the familiar emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. The business trip to Singapore had been cut short. The deal had closed faster than expected, and for once, Marcus felt the pull to return to the place he called home, though he spent so little time there that it barely deserved the name. The sprawling Connecticut estate, with its manicured gardens and marble fountains, was more museum than home, beautiful, cold, and achingly lonely. He'd lost his wife, Catherine, to cancer 5 years ago. They'd never had children, though they'd tried. Catherine had been the warm center of his universe, the one person who saw past the billions to the scared boy from Brooklyn who'd fought his way out of poverty. After she died, Marcus had thrown himself into work with such ferocity that his friends worried, though they worried quietly and from a distance, as people do around the very wealthy. The house was supposed to be empty except for Rosa, his housekeeper. She'd worked for him for 3 years, a quiet, efficient woman in her mid-30s who kept to herself, did her job impeccably, and asked for nothing beyond her modest salary. Marcus knew little about her personal life. She was simply part of the machinery that kept his life running smoothly, as invisible and essential as the heating system or the security cameras. As he stepped through the front door, Marcus noticed something odd. The usual pristine silence was broken by a sound he couldn't quite place, a soft, rhythmic noise coming from somewhere in the back of the house. He moved quietly through the hallway, his expensive shoes soundless on the Italian marble, following the sound toward the service entrance near the kitchen. What he saw when he reached the back door stopped him cold. Rosa was kneeling on the concrete pad near the garbage bins, her uniform dirty, and her hair falling loose from its usual neat bun. But wasn't Rosa that held his attention. It was what she was cradling in her arms. A baby, so small it might have been newborn, wrapped in what looked like a torn piece of bedsheet. And Rosa was crying, tears streaming down her face as she rocked back and forth, whispering words in Spanish that Marcus couldn't understand but felt in his chest. For a moment, Marcus thought he must be hallucinating. The scene was so surreal, so completely outside the ordered reality of his life, that his mind struggled to process it. Then Rosa looked up and saw him standing there, and the expression on her face, pure terror mixed with desperate hope, shattered something inside him. "Mr. Wellington," she gasped, instinctively pulling the baby closer to her chest. "I can explain. Please, I can explain." But before she could say another word, the baby let out a thin, weak cry that sounded more like a kitten than a human infant, and Marcus felt his heart constrict in a way it hadn't since Catherine's last days. Without thinking, he crossed the distance between them and knelt beside Rosa on the cold concrete. "Is the baby hurt?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Rosa's eyes widened with surprise at his question, at his presence beside her rather than towering above. I don't know, senor. I just found her. Here. In the garbage." Her voice broke on the last word. "Someone threw her away. Like trash. What kind of person?" Marcus looked at the tiny face peeking out from the makeshift blanket. The baby's skin had an unhealthy pallor, and she was far too quiet for comfort. "How long ago?" "Maybe 20 minutes. I heard crying when I brought the kitchen waste out. At first, I thought it was a cat, but then—" Rose's hands were shaking. "She's so cold, Mr. Wellington. So cold." Without hesitation, Marcus stripped off his $12,000 suit jacket and wrapped it around the baby, adding its warmth to Rosa's body heat. "We need to get her inside. Now. And call 911. As they hurried into the house, Marcus carrying the baby now, while Rosa ran ahead to open doors, he caught a glimpse of himself in one of the hallway mirrors. The billionaire CEO was gone, replaced by a man with wild eyes and a desperate expression, cradling a foundling infant against his chest. And in that moment, Marcus Wellington felt more alive, more present, more real than he had in 5 long years. The baby stirred against him, and he looked down into dark eyes that seemed far too ancient for such a tiny face. She didn't cry again, just gazed at him with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through all his carefully constructed walls. In that gaze, Marcus saw something he'd forgotten existed: purpose. The paramedics arrived within 15 minutes, but to Marcus, it felt like hours. He paced the marble foyer, still wearing his now rumpled shirt and tie, while Rosa sat on the bottom step of the grand staircase, her face buried in her hands. The baby, they'd laid her carefully on a blanket Rosa had brought, keeping her warm with heating pads set on low, made small sounds that tore at Marcus's heart. She's severely dehydrated and hypothermic, the lead paramedic, a woman named Jennifer with kind eyes and steady hands, reported. We need to get her to the hospital immediately. Do either of you know anything about her parents? Any information at all? Marcus and Rosa exchanged glances. Nothing, Marcus said. My housekeeper found her abandoned near our garbage bins. We have security cameras. I can get you the footage. While the paramedics worked, Marcus pulled up his security system on his phone with shaking hands. The cameras near the service entrance showed everything. At 2:47 p.m., a figure in a dark hoodie had approached, carrying something small. The person had looked around nervously, then placed a bundle near the garbage bins and fled. Even enhanced, the footage revealed nothing useful. No license plate, no clear view of the person's face, just those few seconds of devastating betrayal. I'm going with her, Marcus announced as the paramedics prepared to transport the baby. Sir, are you family? Jennifer asked gently. I'm. Marcus faltered. What was he? A stranger who happened to be home early? I'm the one who found her. I need to make sure she's okay. Jennifer studied him for a moment, then nodded. Come on, then. We need to move. Wait, Rosa stood up, her voice urgent. Mr. Wellington, you should fire me. This is my responsibility. I should have checked the garbage area earlier. I should have. Rosa. Marcus cut her off, his voice firm but not unkind. You saved this child's life. How could I possibly fire you for that? He paused, seeing her disbelief. Come with us. Please. I think we both need to see this through. At the hospital, chaos gave way to controlled urgency. The baby was whisked away to the NICU while Marcus and Rosa were separated for police interviews. Detective Sarah Chun was patient but thorough, asking the same questions multiple ways, clearly trying to determine if either of them knew more than they were saying. Mr. Wellington, she said finally, closing her notebook. I have to ask. This is a very convenient story for someone who might want to acquire a child through unofficial channels. Marcus felt anger flash through him, hot and bright. If I wanted to adopt a child detective, I have the resources to do so legally and properly. I don't need to invent elaborate stories about finding babies in garbage bins. Wealthy people have done stranger things, she observed. But I've checked your security footage, and your story holds up. We're reviewing cameras in the surrounding area, trying to track where the person came from. She softened slightly. The baby is lucky you came home early. Another hour or two in this weather, and we'd be having a very different conversation. It was past midnight when a doctor finally came to speak with them. Dr. Patricia Morris was a tiny woman with steel gray hair and the confident bearing of someone who'd seen everything the emergency room could throw at her. The baby is stable, she said, and Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. She's approximately 2 weeks old full term, and aside from the hypothermia and dehydration, appears healthy. We're treating her for exposure and running standard tests. She paused. She's a fighter. She should have suffered more damage than she did, given how long she was out there. Sometimes these little ones just refuse to give up. Can we see her? Rosa asked softly. Dr. Morris hesitated. You're not family. Please, Marcus said, and was surprised to hear his voice crack. I just need to know she's real. That she's okay. Something in his face must have moved the doctor, because she nodded. 5 minutes. And don't touch anything. The NICU was a realm of beeping machines and hushed voices. The baby lay in an isolette, no longer wrapped in Marcus's jacket, but wearing a tiny hospital gown, with 4 lines and monitors attached to her impossibly small body. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing steady but quick, like a little bird. Marcus pressed his hand against the clear plastic, as close as he could get to touching her, without actually making contact. She doesn't even have a name, he whispered. Rosa stood beside him, fresh tears tracking down her face. In my village in Mexico, we would say she has the strength of the saints to survive. She is meant for something important. What happens to her now? Marcus asked Dr. Morris. Once she's medically cleared, she'll go into the foster care system. Child Protective Services is already involved. They'll find her a placement. The foster care system. Marcus felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. He thought of this tiny miracle child who'd fought her way through abandonment and cold near death, being passed from home to home, becoming a case number in an overwhelmed system. No, Mr. Wellington. He turned to look at the doctor, then at Rosa, then back at the baby. I want to apply to be her foster parent. Is that possible? Dr. Morris blinked in surprise. It's unusual. There's a process. Background checks, home studies, training. It can take months. Then we start tomorrow. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer now. If this baby needs a home, she has one. She has mine. Rosa gasped softly beside him, but when Marcus looked at her, he saw not judgment, but something like wonder. Mr. Wellington, are you sure? A baby is not like running a company. You cannot schedule her needs or delegate her care. I know, Marcus said, though he did not really. But he knew the feeling in his chest, the sense of absolute certainty that had descended on him the moment he'd knelt beside Rosa on that concrete pad. Catherine and I wanted children more than anything. We tried for years. After she died, I thought that dream died with her. But maybe. He looked at the baby again. Maybe this is why I came home early. Maybe this is meant to be. It was a foolish thing to say, too romantic and impractical for a man who'd built his fortune on logic and careful planning. But as Marcus stood in that NICU, watching the steady rise and fall of that tiny chest, he didn't care about logic. For the first time in 5 years, he cared about something beyond his empty routine of work and loneliness. The baby's eyes fluttered open, dark and deep, and seemed to look right at him. And Marcus Wellington, master of the universe, wielded of billions, fell completely and irrevocably in love. The next morning brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Marcus had spent the night in a hospital chair, refusing to leave despite Rosa's gentle insistence that he should go home and rest. When dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, he was still there, watching the baby sleep through the isolette's clear walls. His lawyer, Martin Chun, arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and concern. Martin had been Catherine's college roommate and had become Marcus's closest friend in the years since her death, one of the few people who could speak bluntly to the billionaire without fear. Marcus, I need you to really think about what you're proposing, Martin said, settling into the chair beside him. Foster care, possibly adoption. This isn't a business acquisition. You can't optimize a baby. You can't delegate 3 a.m. feedings to your executive team. I know that, Marcus said, not taking his eyes off the baby. Catherine and I spent years learning about child rearing, preparing for a baby that never came. I haven't forgotten. That was 5 years ago, and you would have had Catherine. Now you're talking about single parenthood, and you work 80-hour weeks. How is that going to work? Marcus finally turned to look at his friend. I'll figure it out. I'll hire help. I'll cut back my hours. Whatever it takes. They're not going to make it easy, Martin warned. A single billionaire man wanting to foster a foundling? The optics alone will raise red flags. They'll wonder if this is some vanity project. They'll question your motives, your stability, your ability to provide emotional care versus just financial support. Then I'll prove them wrong. Marcus's voice held steel. File whatever paperwork needs to be filed. Make whatever calls need to be made. I want to start the process today. Martin sighed but pulled out his tablet. Okay, but you need to know what you're up against. The foster care system is designed to reunify children with their biological families when possible. If they find the mother. She threw her baby away in a garbage bin, Marcus said flatly. That should disqualify her from parenting. It's not that simple. There could be extenuating circumstances, mental health issues, postpartum depression, lack of resources. The courts are sympathetic to mothers, especially if they show any willingness to get help. The thought made Marcus's blood run cold. So what are you saying? That I should just let them take her into the system and hope for the best? I'm saying that you need to be prepared for a fight. And that fight might not have the ending you want. What Martin couldn't know, what Marcus was only beginning to understand himself, was that this wasn't about winning or losing. Something fundamental had shifted in him when he'd seen Rosa crying over that abandoned baby. The walls he'd built around his heart after Catherine's death had cracked, and light was flooding in, painful, bright, and absolutely necessary. The process of becoming a foster parent was indeed Byzantine. Over the following days, Marcus found himself navigating a system that seemed designed to discourage, rather than encourage. Background checks, financial disclosures, home studies, psychological evaluations, training courses, each step revealed new hoops to jump through. The social worker assigned to his case, a woman named Judith Ramirez, was professional but skeptical. During their first meeting in his penthouse office, she walked through his sprawling estate with a clipboard, making notes that Marcus couldn't read. "Mr. Wellington," she said finally, "this home is beautiful, but it's not exactly child-friendly. I see marble floors, sharp corners, expensive art at grabbing height. I see a showplace, not a home where a child can play and be messy and make mistakes." "I can make changes," Marcus said immediately. "Whatever needs to be done." It's not just about physical changes. It's about emotional readiness. You're a single man who works constantly. You've never been a parent. You have no support system in place. Why should I believe you're serious about this and not just acting on an impulse? The question stung because it cut close to the truth. But Marcus thought of that moment on the concrete pad, of Rosa's tears and the baby's ancient eyes, and knew his answer was real even if it was new. "Ms. Ramirez, I understand your concerns. But I'm not asking you to believe I'm perfect. I'm asking you to believe that I'm committed. This child deserves a chance at a real home with someone who will fight for her. I can be that person." "Words are easy, Mr. Wellington. Let's see if your actions match them." Rosa became his unexpected ally in those early days. When Marcus expressed frustration about the baby-proofing requirements, Rosa quietly organized a team to install safety gates, corner guards, and outlet covers. When he struggled through the foster parent training modules late at night, Rosa brought him coffee and sandwiches, sitting with him in comfortable silence. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus asked one evening. "This is far beyond your job description." Rosa looked up from the baby care book she'd been reading. "Because I saw your face when you found her, Mr. Wellington. I have worked in many homes for many rich people. Most of them see their staff as furniture. But you knelt in the dirt beside me. You wrapped your expensive jacket around a baby that was nothing to you. You have a good heart, even if you have forgotten it was there." Her words cracked something open in Marcus's chest. "I miss my wife," he said suddenly, surprising himself. He never talked about Catherine, not even with Martin. "We were going to adopt. She wanted it so badly. And then she got sick, and everything just stopped." "Maybe," Rosa said gently, "this is not about replacing what you lost. Maybe this is about honoring it. Your wife wanted to give love to a child who needed it. Now you can do that for her." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes for the first time since Catherine's funeral. "What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if you are?" Rosa countered. "That baby is alive because you came home early. Because I heard her crying. Because we both acted. Maybe that is enough to start with." At the hospital, the baby grew stronger each day. They couldn't officially name her. That would come later if Marcus's foster application was approved, but the nurses had started calling her Hope, and the name stuck. Marcus visited every day, sometimes twice, learning to help with feedings, to change tiny diapers, to recognize the different cries that meant hungry versus tired versus uncomfortable. The NICU nurses watched this evolution with interest. "Most people don't visit this consistently unless it's their own child," one nurse, Maria, commented. "You really care about her." "She's mine," Marcus said simply. Then, hearing how presumptuous that sounded, "I mean, I want her to be. If they'll let me." "For what it's worth," Maria said, "I think you'd be good for each other. She needs someone who won't give up on her. And you, well, you look less like a zombie every day. She's bringing you back to life." It was true. Marcus found himself thinking less about quarterly reports and more about whether the nursery should be yellow or green. He caught himself researching pediatricians instead of market trends. The emptiness that had consumed him for 5 years was slowly being filled with purpose, with hope, with love for a tiny person who didn't even legally belong to him yet. But the investigation into Hope's abandonment continued, and Marcus knew that any day could bring news that would tear apart this fragile new dream. Detective Chun called regularly with updates. No leads on the mother, no missing baby reports filed, no matches in any database. Hope was a ghost, appearing in Marcus's life as suddenly and mysteriously as spring rain. "Part of me hopes they never find her," Marcus confessed to Martin one afternoon. They were in Marcus's office, reviewing the latest foster care paperwork. "Is that terrible?" "It's human," Martin replied. "But you need to prepare yourself. The courts favor reunification. If they find the biological mother and she wants the baby back, you'll have very little standing to prevent it. Even after she abandoned her. Even then. Especially if she can demonstrate that she's gotten help, that she was in crisis. The law is designed to preserve biological families." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out over his city of steel and glass. Then I'll fight harder. I'll use every resource I have. I'll hire the best lawyers, call in every favor. I won't let that baby go back to someone who threw her away. Marcus. Martin's voice was gentle. You're one of the most powerful men in the world. But even you can't control everything. Sometimes you have to trust in the process. But trust had never come easily to Marcus Wellington. He'd built his empire by controlling variables, by never leaving anything to chance. Now he was being asked to surrender control over the thing that mattered most, to place Hope's future in the hands of a system that seemed designed to break hearts. That night, as Marcus sat in the NICU feeding Hope her bottle, watching her tiny mouth work and her dark eyes focus on his face, he made a silent promise. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would become the father this child deserved. He would prove to the skeptics, to the system, to himself that love wasn't about perfection or preparation. It was about showing up day after day, choosing to care even when it was hard. Hope finished her bottle and let out a small burp that made Marcus laugh. Actually laugh, something he hadn't done in longer than he could remember. She blinked up at him, and in that moment, Marcus Wellington understood what Catherine had tried to tell him all those years ago, that the love you give is never wasted, that opening your heart is always worth the risk, and that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice. Sometimes it's about a billionaire and his housekeeper finding a miracle in the garbage and refusing to let it go. 3 weeks after finding Hope, Marcus sat across from Judith Ramirez in what he'd converted into a nursery. The room, once a sterile guest bedroom, had been transformed into a warm, sunlit space with soft yellow walls, a sturdy crib, and shelves stocked with books and toys. Every sharp edge had been padded, every outlet covered, every window secured. It looked like something from a magazine spread, and that was precisely the problem. Mr. Wellington, Judith said, setting down her clipboard. This room is perfect. Almost too perfect. It looks like a showroom, not a space where a real child will live. Marcus felt his frustration rising. I don't understand. You told me to make the space safe and welcoming. I've done exactly that. You've created an ideal. But babies are messy. They spit up, they have diaper blowouts, they throw food. Can you handle that? Can you handle your pristine home being covered in fingerprints and stains? Catherine and I renovated our old house 3 times trying to prepare for a baby, Marcus said quietly. I learned to care less about perfect spaces and more about perfect moments. I can handle mess. Judith's expression softened slightly. Tell me about your wife. About what happened. It was the first time during this process that someone had asked about Catherine with genuine interest rather than clinical assessment. Marcus found himself talking about things he'd kept locked away, how Catherine had filled their home with laughter, how she'd insisted on taking foster care training even when they'd struggled with infertility, how she'd made him promise that if anything happened to her, he wouldn't stop living. She made me promise, Marcus said, his voice thick, that I wouldn't let fear stop me from loving again, from taking chances. I think I broke that promise for 5 years. And then Hope appeared, and I remembered what it felt like to care about something beyond the next board meeting. Hope. Judith raised an eyebrow. That's what the nurses call her. It feels right. Judith made a note. The psychological evaluation shows you've been dealing with unresolved grief. Dr. Morrison suggests you might be trying to replace what you lost rather than genuinely wanting to parent this specific child. The accusation hit Marcus hard. That's not true. Hope isn't a replacement for anything. She's herself, completely unique and precious. Yes, finding her has helped me heal. But that doesn't mean my love for her is less real. How will you handle the daily challenges? You've never changed a diaper, never dealt with colic, never spent a sleepless night with a sick infant. You have people who do everything for you. How will that translate to actual parenting? I'm learning, Marcus said. The NICU nurses have been teaching me. I can feed her, burp her, change her. I've taken every training course available. I've read every book. And Rosa, my housekeeper, she's agreed to help. She raised 3 younger siblings in Mexico. She knows what I don't. Rosa Martinez. Judith consulted her notes. I need to interview her as well. She'll be a significant presence in the child's life if you're approved. She's been incredible. Honestly, I don't think I could do this without her. That concerns me, Judith said bluntly. You're essentially admitting you need to hire someone to do the actual parenting. How is that different from Hope being in foster care? Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where he'd already imagined teaching Hope to walk, to identify flowers, to appreciate beauty. It's different because I'll be there. Not just paying someone else to care, but actually present. I'm restructuring my entire company, delegating responsibilities, cutting my workload by more than half. I've already started. This was true. In the past 3 weeks, Marcus had shocked his board by announcing he was stepping back from day-to-day operations. He'd promoted his COO, restructured his executive team, and made it clear that his priority was becoming a father. The business world was buzzing with speculation about what had caused Marcus Wellington's sudden change in priorities. Judith stood and joined him at the window. I've seen a lot of prospective foster parents, Mr. Wellington. Some are genuinely called to it. Others are trying to fill voids in their own lives. The latter rarely works out well for the children. Then help me prove which one I am, Marcus said, turning to face her. Give me a chance. Let me show you that I'm serious, that I'm capable, that I can give Hope the home she deserves. The investigation is ongoing, Judith reminded him. Even if I recommend approval, if they find the biological mother. I know, Marcus interrupted. Martin reminds me daily. But I can't live in fear of what might happen. I can only prepare for the future I'm trying to build. After Judith left, Rosa found Marcus sitting in the nursery, holding a stuffed elephant he bought on impulse during a rare hour away from the hospital. How did it go? She asked. I don't know. She's hard to read. Marcus turned the elephant over in his hands. She thinks I'm trying to replace Catherine. Maybe she's right. No, Rosa said firmly, sitting down beside him. You are not replacing anyone. You are honoring your wife by doing what she wanted, by opening your heart. That is different. What if I fail, Rosa? What if I'm approved and I can't handle it? What if I let Hope down? Rosa took his hands in hers, her calloused fingers warm and strong. Mr. Wellington, Marcus, you are already worrying like a real parent. That is a good sign. The people who fail are the ones who think they know everything. You know you do not, and you are humble enough to learn. That is what matters. The interview with Rosa happened 2 days later. Marcus wasn't present, but Rosa told him about it afterward over coffee in the kitchen, the first time she'd sat at his table rather than serving him. She asked me why I am helping you, Rosa said. She wanted to know if you are paying me extra, if you have threatened my job, if this is part of my duties. What did you tell her? The truth. That I am helping because I want to. Because I saw something that day we found Hope. I saw a man remember how to be human. I told her about my own children back in Mexico. How I send them money, how I see them only once a year, how it breaks my heart. I told her that if I can help give Hope the childhood my own children cannot have with me, that means something. Marcus hadn't known Rosa had children. Why didn't you tell me? Why would I? You are my employer, not my friend. She smiled to soften the words. But now, maybe we are something more. Compadres. Partners in this crazy thing you are trying to do. I can help you, Marcus said suddenly. With your children. I can sponsor them, bring them here, make sure they have everything they need. Rosa shook her head. That is kind, but no. They are happy in Mexico with my mother. They go to good schools now because of the money I send. They do not need to be uprooted. But I appreciate that you think of it. It shows the man you are becoming. Detective Chun called that afternoon with an update. We've tracked the person who abandoned the baby to a bus station 3 towns over, but we lost the trail there. We're checking ticket sales, but it's a dead end so far. Whoever did this knew how to disappear. So Hope stays in limbo, Marcus said, feeling the weight of uncertainty. For now. But Mr. Wellington, I have to tell you, cases like this, where there's no missing child report, no frantic family searching, often mean one thing. Someone who is desperate enough to abandon the child isn't likely to come forward. That doesn't mean they won't, but the longer time passes, the more likely it is that Hope can stay with me. I can't make promises. But yes, that's the reality. Marcus hung up feeling a confusing mixture of hope and guilt. Hope's chance at being his daughter depended on another woman's continued absence, on trauma and desperation, and choices Marcus couldn't begin to understand. How could he celebrate circumstances born of someone else's tragedy? That evening, he shared his conflict with Martin over takeout in the converted nursery. You're overthinking it, Martin said, wielding chopsticks with expert precision. Yes, the situation is complicated. But you didn't create it. You're just trying to make something good come from something terrible. That's not wrong. Catherine would know what to do, Marcus said. She always had better instincts about people, about right and wrong. Catherine would tell you to trust your heart, Martin replied. She'd probably also tell you that you're being an idiot for sitting here angsting instead of being at the hospital with Hope. Marcus laughed despite himself. You sound just like her. I learned from the best. At the hospital, Marcus found Hope awake and alert, her dark eyes following the mobile above her isolette. She'd gained weight, pink filling out her cheeks, her movements stronger and more purposeful. Maria, the night nurse, smiled when she saw him. She's doing so well. Dr. Morris thinks she'll be ready for discharge soon. Do you know where she'll be going? I'm hoping she'll come home with me, Marcus said. If they approve me. They'd be crazy not to, Maria said. I've worked in this NICU for 15 years. I can tell the difference between people going through the motions and people who genuinely love these babies. You're the latter, Mr. Wellington. Call me Marcus, he said, something he'd never offered to anyone in a professional capacity before Catherine's death. Marcus, then. Maria opened the isolette. She's due for feeding. Want to do the honors. Holding Hope in his arms, feeling her warmth and weight, watching her focus on his face as she drank her bottle, this had become Marcus's favorite part of every day. In these moments, all the complexity fell away. There was no system to navigate, no approval to seek, no uncertainty about the future. There was just a man and a baby, connected by something deeper than law or blood. Your daddy loves you, he whispered, testing out the word. Whatever happens, wherever you end up, I need you to know that. You changed my life, Hope. You reminded me what matters. Hope's tiny hand wrapped around his finger, and Marcus felt his heart crack open completely. He'd thought he knew what love was. What he'd felt for Catherine had been enormous, consuming, the center of his universe. But this was different. This protective, fierce, selfless love for a child who might never be legally his was transforming him in ways he couldn't have imagined. When he finally left the hospital that night, Marcus saw his reflection in the glass doors and barely recognized himself. The haunted, hollow-eyed man who mechanically gone through his days was gone. In his place was someone softer, more human, marked by sleepless nights and constant worry, but also by something like joy. He pulled out his phone and called Martin. File an appeal for expedited approval. I don't care what it costs or what favors we have to call in. I want to bring Hope home as soon as she's medically cleared. Marcus, we can't rush this. The system has its timelines for a reason. Then let's work within the system, but push every boundary we can. That baby needs a home, Martin. She needs love and stability, and someone who won't give up on her. I can be that person. I am that person. I just need them to see it. After hanging up, Marcus sent a message to Rosa. Start preparing the nursery for real. Hope is coming home. He didn't have approval yet. He didn't have any guarantee that this dream wouldn't be ripped away. But Marcus Wellington had built an empire by believing in possibilities others couldn't see, by taking calculated risks, by refusing to accept that things couldn't be done. He'd apply that same determination to becoming Hope's father. Because some things, some people, were worth fighting for with everything you had. And Hope, his tiny miracle found in the garbage, was worth more than all his billions, all his success, all his carefully constructed life. She was worth everything, including the risk of having his heart broken all over again. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after finding Hope. Marcus had finally been granted emergency foster placement, and Hope had been home for 3 days, 3 exhausting, miraculous days of round-the-clock feedings, diaper changes, and learning the specific cry that meant, I need you now versus, I'm just stretching my vocal cords. Mr. Wellington. Detective Chen's voice was careful, measured. We've found the mother. Marcus sat up in bed, his heart pounding. In the nursery next door, Hope slept peacefully in her crib, monitored by the baby camera Marcus checked obsessively. What? Her name is Emily Thornton. She's 19. She came forward this evening, walked into our station, and confessed to abandoning the baby. She wants her daughter back. The world seemed to tilt. Marcus gripped his phone, so hard his knuckles went white. She threw Hope in the garbage. She left her to die. I understand your anger, Mr. Wellington, but there are circumstances you need to know about. Detective Chen sighed. Emily was raped. She's from a strict religious family that disowned her when she got pregnant. She was living in her car, had no money, no support, no prenatal care. When the baby came, she delivered alone, Mr. Wellington, in a gas station bathroom. She panicked. She's been in crisis, suffering from severe postpartum depression and PTSD. Marcus felt his anger colliding with unwanted empathy. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, it doesn't. But it explains it. She's checked herself into a treatment facility. She's getting help. And she's asking for her baby back. When? Marcus's voice was hollow. There's a hearing scheduled for next week. You'll need to be there. Your lawyer should prepare you. This won't be easy. After hanging up, Marcus sat in the dark for a long time, listening to Hope's soft breathing through the monitor. He thought about Emily Thornton, 19 and alone, giving birth in a gas station bathroom. He thought about her terror, her desperation, the impossible choice she'd faced. And he thought about Hope, innocent in all of this, whose entire future hung in the balance. Rosa found him at dawn, still sitting in the dark. I heard the phone, she said softly. What happened? Marcus told her everything. When he finished, Rosa was quiet for a long moment. That poor girl, she finally said. Both of them, that poor mother and that poor baby. How can you have sympathy for her? Marcus demanded. She abandoned hope. Because I understand desperation, Rosa replied. When I left my children in Mexico to come here, people judged me too. They said, what kind of mother leaves her babies? But they did not know about the poverty, the lack of opportunities, the fear that my children would grow up with nothing. Sometimes terrible circumstances make people do terrible things. This is different. Is it? You are angry because you love Hope. But Emily is her mother. She carried her, gave birth to her. That bond does not disappear because of one terrible decision made in crisis. So you think I should just give Hope up? Let her go to someone who proved she can't handle parenthood? I think, Rosa said carefully, that this is not about what you want or what Emily wants. It is about what is best for Hope. And figuring that out is going to break everyone's heart. Martin arrived later that morning with a team of lawyers. They spread documents across Marcus's dining room table, while Hope napped upstairs, unaware that her entire world was being negotiated. The law favors reunification with biological parents, Martin said, repeating what Marcus already knew. But we have arguments. The abandonment, the danger Hope was in, the lack of prenatal care, the fact that Emily waited weeks to come forward. We can fight this. What are our chances? Honestly, 40-60 against us. Maybe worse. Emily's cooperation with treatment, her age, the circumstances of the pregnancy, these are all factors that will generate sympathy. Sympathy, Marcus repeated bitterly. Hope could have died. And Emily could have died giving birth alone, Martin countered gently. I know you don't want to hear this, but the court will see a traumatized teenager who made a terrible mistake, not a monster. They'll see someone who came forward voluntarily, who's getting help. That matters. Over the following days, Marcus learned more about Emily Thornton than he wanted to know. She'd been an honor student, accepted to college before the assault that changed everything. Her parents, members of a fundamentalist church, had literally put her out on the street when she refused to name her attacker or have an abortion. She'd worked minimum wage jobs until she couldn't hide the pregnancy anymore, then lived in her car, too ashamed to seek help. The night Hope was born, Emily had been in labor for hours. She'd driven herself to the gas station, thinking she could get help, but the pain had been too intense. She delivered Hope in that bathroom, alone and terrified, with nothing but paper towels and her own shock to deal with the reality of a newborn baby. She held her for an hour, Detective Chin told Marcus during one of their conversations. Just sat there on that bathroom floor, holding her daughter and crying. She told us she knew she couldn't keep the baby, that she had no way to care for her, but she couldn't bring herself to go to a hospital because she was afraid she'd be arrested. So she chose what she thought was the next best thing, a wealthy neighborhood where someone would find the baby quickly. She chose my garbage bins. She chose a mansion with security cameras, good lighting, regular trash pickup. She wasn't thinking clearly, Mr. Wellington, but she wasn't completely reckless either. She was trying to give her baby a chance. Marcus wanted to cling to his anger, to see Emily as the villain in this story. But the more he learned, the harder that became. She was just a kid herself, broken by trauma, and failed by every system that should have protected her. The hearing arrived too quickly. Marcus wore his best suit like armor, arriving at the courthouse with Martin and a legal team that had cost him a small fortune. But when Emily Thornton walked in with her public defender, Marcus's carefully constructed arguments crumbled. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with haunted eyes and a face that looked even younger than 19. Her hands shook as she sat down, and she kept her gaze fixed on the floor until the judge called the hearing to order. When she finally looked up and saw Marcus holding Hope, her face crumbled and tears streamed down her cheeks. "That's my baby," she whispered, barely audible. "That's my daughter." Hope, as if sensing the tension, began to fuss. Marcus automatically shifted her, patting her back in the practiced motion he'd learned over the past weeks. Emily watched every movement, her expression a mixture of longing and grief so intense that Marcus had to look away. Judge Patricia Morrison was known for being tough, but fair. She reviewed the case file with careful attention, asking pointed questions of both sides. To Marcus, she said, "Mr. Wellington, I understand you've opened your home to this child and grown attached. But attachment is not the same as legal parental rights. Can you explain why you believe it's in this child's best interest to remain with you rather than be reunified with her biological mother?" Marcus stood, his heart pounding. He'd prepared a speech about Emily's abandonment, about his resources, about everything he could provide. But looking at Emily's broken face, the words dried up. "Your Honor," he said slowly, "I believe Hope deserves a home with someone who will never give up on her, who will always fight for her, who will love her unconditionally no matter what circumstances arise. I believe I can be that person." "And you don't believe Miss Thornton can be that person?" Marcus looked at Emily, really looked at her, and saw not a villain but a victim, not a monster but another human being destroyed by circumstances beyond her control. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I want to believe she can't because that makes this easier. But the truth is, I don't know what she's capable of now, after treatment, after support. I only know what happened in her worst moment." Judge Morrison turned to Emily. "Ms. Thornton, you've heard Mr. Wellington. You've seen how he cares for your daughter. Why should I give her back to you?" Emily stood on shaking legs. "Because she's mine," she whispered. "Because I'm her mother, and I love her, and I made a mistake that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Because I was broken, Your Honor, but I'm trying to put myself back together. Because my baby deserves to know her mother wanted her, even when I couldn't see how to keep her safe." She turned to Marcus, then, meeting his eyes for the first time. "I see how you hold her. I see that you love her. And I'm grateful, God, I'm so grateful that she found you instead of someone who might have hurt her. But she's my daughter. She came from my body. I carried her for 9 months, and I think about her every second of every day. Please don't take her from me." The raw honesty in her voice, the desperate hope in her eyes, broke something in Marcus. He thought about Catherine, about their dreams of parenthood, about the love they'd planned to give a child. And he realized that love wasn't about possession. It wasn't about who deserved or who could provide more. It was about what was best for Hope. "Your Honor," Marcus heard himself say, "may I approach?" Judge Morrison looked surprised, but nodded. Marcus walked to where Emily stood, Hope still in his arms. Up close, he could see Emily's exhaustion, her fear, the way her hands trembled with the obvious desire to hold her daughter. "I need to ask you something," Marcus said quietly. "And I need you to be completely honest. Are you ready to be a mother? Really ready? Because if you take her, and then realize you can't handle it, if you abandon her again, it will destroy her. I can't let that happen." Emily met his gaze, tears streaming down her face. "I'm scared out of my mind," she admitted. "I don't know anything about being a mom. I don't have a place to live yet, or a job, or any of the things she needs. But I love her, Mr. Wellington. I loved her even when I was too broken to show it. And I'm getting help. I'm doing the work. I want to be the mother she deserves." Marcus looked down at Hope, at her perfect tiny face, her dark eyes that held such trust. Then he made a decision that went against every selfish instinct he had. "Your Honor," he said, turning back to the judge, "I'd like to propose something." "I want to support Emily," Marcus continued, his voice steady even as his heart fractured. "Not fight her. Not because I don't love Hope, I do, more than I can express. But because I think there might be a way forward that doesn't require anyone to lose." Judge Morrison leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. "Explain, Mr. Wellington." Marcus had made billions through innovation, through seeing solutions where others saw only problems. Now he needed to apply that same creativity to the most important negotiation of his life. Emily needs stability, resources, and support to be the mother she wants to be. I can provide those things. I have a guest house on my property that's fully furnished and private. I can offer Emily a job, nothing exploitative, something real that builds skills and provides income. She could live there, care for Hope with support from Rosa and myself, attend therapy, finish her education. We could co-parent, in a sense, while she gets on her feet. The courtroom went silent. Martin looked stunned. Emily's public defender started whispering urgently to his client. Emily herself was staring at Marcus as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "You want me to live with you?" Emily said. "With Hope? After what I did?" "I want Hope to know her mother," Marcus said. "And I want her mother to have the support Catherine and I never had, a village, a safety net, people who won't let her fail. You made a terrible mistake in the worst circumstances imaginable. But you came forward. You got help. You're trying. That matters." Judge Morrison tapped her pen thoughtfully. "This is highly unusual, Mr. Wellington." "So is this entire situation, Your Honor. But unusual doesn't mean wrong." Marcus looked at Emily again. "I'm not saying it will be easy. I'm not saying I've forgiven what happened. Forgiveness is a process. But I am saying that Hope deserves better than being torn between two people who love her. She deserves both of us, working together." "Why would you do this?" Emily whispered. "I'm the reason you might lose her." "You're also the reason she exists," Marcus replied. "And maybe in some strange way, you're the reason I remembered how to live. I came home early that day. Rosa heard Hope crying. 1,000 small things had to align for her to survive. Maybe this is supposed to align too." Judge Morrison called a recess. In the hallway, Martin pulled Marcus aside, his expression torn between admiration and concern. "That was either the most brilliant or most insane thing you've ever done," Martin said. "If this works, it could be beautiful. If it doesn't, then I'll have tried," Marcus finished. "Catherine would have wanted me to try." Rosa, who'd been sitting in the back of the courtroom, came forward and hugged Marcus tightly. "Your wife would be very proud," she said. "And so am I." When they returned, Emily had made her decision. "I want to try," she told the judge, her voice small but determined. "If Mr. Wellington is really offering this, I want to try. For Hope." Judge Morrison spent the next hour outlining conditions. Emily would continue therapy 3 times a week. She'd submit to regular evaluations. She'd maintain employment and work toward her GED. Marcus would remain Hope's foster parent for now, with Emily having graduated visitation that would increase as she demonstrated stability. They'd both attend co-parenting counseling. The arrangement would be reviewed every 3 months. "I'm going out on a limb here," Judge Morrison said finally. "This is not standard procedure. But nothing about this case has been standard. I'm approving this arrangement on a trial basis because I believe both of you have Hope's best interests at heart. Don't make me regret." The transformation of the guest house happened quickly. Marcus hired decorators who specialized in creating calming, therapeutic spaces. The small structure became a sanctuary, soft colors, comfortable furniture, space for both Emily and Hope. Rosa helped Emily shop for clothes and supplies, treating the girl with the same gentle firmness she'd shown Marcus. "You are going to make mistakes," Rosa told Emily as they arranged Hope's things in the nursery Marcus had created in Emily's space. "All new mothers do. But now you have help. You are not alone anymore." The first night Emily stayed on the property, Marcus barely slept. He kept Hope's monitor on, listening to Emily's hesitant movements, her soft voice as she sang to her daughter. Around 2 a.m., he heard Hope crying and instinctively got up to help. He found Emily in the nursery, tears streaming down her face as she tried to calm the baby. "I don't know what she wants," Emily said desperately when she saw Marcus. "I've fed her, changed her, everything. Why won't she stop crying?" Marcus stepped into the room. "May I?" Emily handed Hope over, and Marcus walked with her, patting her back in the specific rhythm he'd learned she preferred. After a few minutes, Hope settled, her cries subsiding into hiccups. "How did you do that?" Emily asked, wonder and envy mixing in her voice. "Practice," Marcus said. "And don't worry, she's testing you. Babies can sense uncertainty. The more confident you become, the easier it will get." He handed Hope back to Emily. "Try it. Walk with her just like I did." They spent the next hour in that nursery, Marcus teaching Emily the small tricks he'd learned, the subtle signs that indicated what Hope needed. It was awkward and uncomfortable and occasionally painful. This girl had almost cost Marcus everything he'd come to want. But watching Emily's face light up when Hope finally smiled at her, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. Co-parenting counseling was harder than either of them expected. Dr. Sarah Kim didn't let them hide behind politeness or avoid difficult topics. "Emily, you need to understand the trauma you caused Marcus," Dr. Kim said during one session. He opened his heart to Hope, rearranged his entire life, and then faced losing her. "That's devastating." "I know," Emily whispered. "I think about it all the time. I don't know how to make it right." "And Marcus, you need to understand that Emily isn't your enemy. She's a trauma survivor making her way back. Your resentment, however justified, won't help Hope. I'm trying, Marcus said. But every time I look at Emily, I remember finding Hope in the garbage. I remember how cold she was, how she could have died. Then we work on that, Dr. Kim said, because Hope is watching both of you. She'll absorb the tension, the unspoken resentment. If you can't find a way to genuine partnership, this arrangement will hurt her. Slowly, painfully, they began to heal. Emily proved herself determined, attending every therapy session, working hard at the job Marcus had arranged for her in his company's community outreach program, studying for her GED at night. She was awkward with Hope at first, unsure and easily discouraged, but she showed up every day, trying again and again until the motions became natural. Marcus learned to step back, to let Emily have her moments with Hope even when it terrified him. He learned to see her not as the desperate girl who'd abandoned a baby, but as Hope's mother, flawed and struggling, but genuinely trying. Rosa became the bridge between them, the neutral party who could speak honestly to both. "You are both so stubborn," she told him one afternoon when they'd been arguing about Hope's sleep schedule. "You both love that baby. That should be enough to figure out the rest." "It's not that simple," Marcus protested. "Yes, it is," Rosa countered. "You make it complicated because you are both scared. Marcus, you are scared of losing Hope. Emily, you are scared of failing her again. But that fear is making you fight each other instead of working together." She was right, of course. Gradually, Marcus and Emily stopped circling each other like wary opponents and started actually communicating. They established routines. Marcus did morning feedings, Emily did afternoons, they alternated nights. They celebrated Hope's milestones together. Her first smile, her first time sleeping 4 hours straight, the day she recognized both their voices. 3 months into the arrangement, something shifted. Hope had a fever, her first illness, and both Marcus and Emily stayed up all night taking turns holding her, cooling her with damp cloths, administering medicine. At 4 a.m., exhausted and worried, they found themselves sitting on the floor of the nursery together, Hope finally sleeping peacefully between them. "I'm sorry," Emily said suddenly. "I've said it before, but I don't think I really meant it until now. Sitting here, seeing how much you love her, understanding what you went through thinking you might lose her, I'm so sorry, Marcus." Marcus looked at this girl who'd grown so much in 3 months, who'd faced her demons and come out stronger. "I'm sorry too," he said, "for resenting you, for making this harder than it needed to be. You're her mother. You deserve to be her mother." "And you're her father," Emily replied. "Not legally maybe, but in every way that matters. She lights up when she sees you. She knows you're hers." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Hope sleep. Finally, Emily spoke again. "My therapist says I need to tell you the whole story. About that night. Would you want to hear it?" Marcus wasn't sure he did, but he nodded. Emily told him everything, the assault, the rejection by her family, the terror of being pregnant and alone. She told him about the labor, the pain, the moment Hope was born, and Emily had looked at her daughter's face and felt simultaneous love and despair. "I held her and thought, I can't do this," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "I had nothing to give her. No home, no money, no future. I thought she'd be better off with someone else, anyone else. So I wrapped her in my shirt because I didn't have a blanket, and I drove to the richest neighborhood I could think of. I chose your house because it looked safe, because I saw Rosa through the window, and she looked kind." "You saw Rosa?" "I watched for almost an hour, making sure someone was home, that the baby would be found quickly. I know it sounds crazy, but I was trying to protect her. I was just too broken to do it the right way." Marcus reached out and took Emily's hand, the first time they'd voluntarily touched. "Thank you for telling me. I needed to understand." The court review at 6 months was overwhelmingly positive. Emily had maintained perfect attendance at therapy, completed her GED with honors, and been promoted at work. The evaluator's report praised the co-parenting arrangement, noting Hope's obvious attachment to both adults and the healthy dynamic that had developed. "This is remarkable," Judge Morrison said. "When I approved this arrangement, I wasn't sure it would work. But you've both exceeded expectations. Emily, you've demonstrated real growth and commitment. Marcus, you've shown flexibility and generosity that goes beyond what anyone could have required of you." She made her ruling. Emily would transition to primary custody, with Marcus having extensive visitation and continuing his role as foster parent. It was the outcome Marcus had known was coming, had even worked toward, but it still felt like a piece of his heart being torn away. That night, after the celebrations had died down and everyone had gone home, Marcus sat in what had been Hope's nursery in the main house, the room he'd decorated with such hopes 7 months ago. Rosa found him there. "You are crying," she observed. "I thought I could do this," Marcus said. "I thought I could share her, let her go. But God, Rosa, it hurts." "Of course it hurts. Love always hurts when things change. But you are not losing her, Marcus. You are gaining a new kind of family. It's not what I imagined." "No," Rosa agreed. "It is better, because Hope gets both of you. She gets her mother who fought her way back from darkness, and her father who loved her when he didn't have to. She gets twice the love, twice the protection, twice the people willing to sacrifice for her." Marcus wiped his eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "I have always been wise. You rich people just don't listen to the help." Rosa smiled to show she was teasing. "Come. Emily made dinner. She wants to talk to you about something." In the guest house, which had become Emily's home, Marcus found her at the table with Hope in a high chair beside her, making a mess with mashed sweet potatoes. The domestic scene was so normal, so perfect, that Marcus felt his heart crack and heal simultaneously. "Hey," Emily said nervously. "Thanks for coming. I wanted to talk to you about something before I ask officially." "Okay." Emily took a deep breath. "I want to know if you'd be interested in becoming Hope's godfather. Officially, legally, with paperwork and everything, so that if anything ever happens to me, she'd come to you automatically, and so that you'd have official standing in her life." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Emily, you saved her life, Marcus. And then you saved mine. You didn't have to offer me this chance to let me be her mother while also keeping you in her life. But you did, and it's made all the difference. Hope deserves to have you as her father in whatever way the law allows. And I want that for both of you." "Yes," Marcus said, the word coming out rough. "Yes, I'd be honored." Emily smiled, that hesitant expression transforming into something radiant. "Good, because I already started the paperwork. I hope that's okay." They celebrated with the sweet potato Hope was enthusiastically spreading everywhere, with laughter and tears, and the beginning of something that felt like family. It wasn't the family Marcus had imagined. It was complicated and unconventional and required more grace than he'd known he possessed. But it was real, built on choice and forgiveness and love that transcended the easy labels of parent and child. 1 year after finding Hope in the garbage, Marcus stood in his backyard at Hope's first birthday party. Emily was there, healthy and confident, working toward her college degree. Rosa was there, having become Hope's unofficial grandmother. Martin was there with his family. Even Judge Morrison had come, curious to see how her unusual ruling had played out. Hope, wearing a frilly dress Emily had picked out and a bow Marcus had insisted on, smashed her cake with gleeful abandon. She had Emily's dark eyes and Marcus's determined chin, and she was surrounded by a circle of adults who loved her beyond reason. "Quite a year," Martin observed, coming to stand beside Marcus. "Quite a life," Marcus corrected. "I thought I knew what I wanted, a traditional family, a child I could call mine alone. But this is better. More complicated, more challenging, but infinitely richer." Emily approached, Hope in her arms covered in blue frosting. "I think someone wants to say goodnight to her favorite person." "Which favorite person?" Marcus teased. "She has so many." "Today. You." Emily handed Hope over, and the baby immediately grabbed Marcus's nose, her favorite game. "Thank you again, Marcus. For everything. For seeing past my worst moment to who I could become." "Thank you for fighting to become that person," Marcus replied, "and for sharing her with me." As the sun set over the estate that had once been a showplace and was now a home, Marcus held Hope and felt the pieces of his life finally click into place. Catherine would have loved this unconventional family, would have embraced Emily and Rosa and all the beautiful mess of their shared lives. She'd always believed that love could transform anything, could heal any wound, could bridge any distance. She'd been right. Hope fell asleep against Marcus's chest, her small body completely trusting, completely secure. And Marcus Wellington, who'd spent 5 years believing his capacity for love had died with his wife, understood that the heart was infinite, that there was always room for one more person, one more connection, one more chance to choose love over fear. "Happy birthday, Hope," he whispered. "Thank you for coming home early. Thank you for giving me a reason to remember how to live." In the gathering darkness, Surrounded by the people who'd become his family through circumstance and choice, Marcus finally understood what Catherine had tried to tell him in those last days. That endings are also beginnings, that loss creates space for unexpected joy, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories start in the most unlikely places. Even sometimes in the garbage pile behind a billionaire's mansion, where a housekeeper's compassion and a lonely man's open heart could combine to create something miraculous. A family, not born from blood or law, but from choice and sacrifice, and the stubborn belief that love, in the end, is always worth the risk.